Okay. What's up? Oh, do you want me to turn the game back on? Which game do you want? Do you want that one? That one? Okay. Okay. Here. You can tap around. Okay. Can you take this? Okay. I'm going to wait until folks come online. Okay. If you hear my son is playing a tablet game in the background.
I turned the breaking.
Oh, did it turn off? Oh no, you pressed the button and it went back to the home screen. That? You want that one? Okay, there you go. Press this one. Can you hold it? Here you go. Alright, I'm going to give it a few more minutes so that folks can log on and then we can get going. Buddy, you gotta stop pressing the button. You can't press the button. How about this one?
Take that.
You want to take that? Let me get this started for you. Here. Why don't you try this one?
No, take that. Take that.
You can get out of the chair and get it. Alright, here. Okay. Alright, we've got about 6 people watching. Jeez. 7, hooray! Okay, so welcome to our final lecture of the semester. Yay or no, depending on your outlook. So real quick, I say this all the time now, but just FYI, if you are coming to this because you follow my YouTube account and you saw that I went live and you found me through Little Nemo, just FYI, this is a class for my students. So if I do ask some audience participation questions, please let my students answer. Because you're welcome to watch, but this is for their growth and benefit. So that being said, what are we going to talk about today? Well, what we're going to talk about is something that the slide says visibility festivals, promo items, blah, blah, blah. However, we are going to call this, my informal name for it is, you made a game, now what? Also, our teaching assistant is here, as you can hear in the background. No, not jump. Don't jump from that. That's a bad idea. So what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about, first of all, precisely that. You made a game, now what? What happens when you make a game? We're going to talk about festivals. So like places to potentially send your game and get people to have their eyes on it. How to run and build a booth for a game. How to do merchandising for a game. Now these are all like overviews. These are not like all particularly like exhaustive looks. You can't, I mean, this would be a whole class otherwise, but you know, this hopefully gives you some things to think about and look up. Putting your work up on online marketplaces, which you've already technically been doing. And then social media or building an audience without feeding the trolls. You know what? I'm actually going to also, because we were talking about similar things with my capstone students, I'm going to invite them to this lecture as well. Okay. So, hello, 8 people. What we're going to do, see, like, that's not nearly everybody in the class, but it's like, these 8 people are going to have this secret knowledge, and the people that are playing Skip Day are not going to have it. So they're really only hurting themselves by playing Skip Day. So what are we going to talk about? Well, the first thing we're going to talk about is you made a game, now what? And you're in this course, so you actually made 3 games. Congratulations. You know, and you've made at least 3 games. Like, you know, you make games for other classes as well. So congrats, you made a game. Making games is hard. I don't know how games get released. It's like kind of ridiculous because they're so tough to make. But you've made some. So pat yourself on the back. But what do you do with it? And that's what a lot of people, especially young designers, you know, one of the things that is a weakness of game design programs, and not, you know, not, I'm speaking broadly, is that game design programs, and this is why you always hear me say, like, don't just... Like, if you are only asking me questions about the technology, you're wasting your time in college because you could get that from YouTube or an online resource. What you get when you do, you know, what you should, and I hope what you know, ask questions about as you know, many of you are juniors or potentially even seniors. The real stuff, the real meat of this is talking with somebody who's been through this and asking them like words of wisdom and examples and things like that. And one of them really is like, you know, what do you do when you've gone through the process of putting one of these here things together? So some options, you know, really what you want to do is like, you've made a project. How can we maximize its visibility and benefit to you? Because, you know, oh, I did a project and I learned how to push the buttons in the software. That's kind of missing the point. What you've done is you've gotten experience with collaboration. You've gotten experience with the pipeline. You might have even gotten experience with launching something or telling a member of the press or a community about something. So these are all really important experiences, and we want to maximize that. So, you know, you've got 3 tools, 3 weapons, 3 whatever you want to, assets, whatever you want to call them, out of a class like this. And in doing so, you've got 3 things that you can use to show off to somebody and meaningfully develop your career. So what are we going to do with that? Well, maybe you put it up for download. You know, that's one of the things that, you know, I've certainly allowed to be an option in the class. You know, you all have itch.io pages for your games. And I've said, like, you know, if you're not comfortable making them public, you know, go for it. Like, make them private. It's cool. But, you know, a lot of you have just let them be up for people to download. So, you know, I don't know if you've looked at your analytics. Yeah, right.
I see.
Hello.
I see.
Oh. I don't know if you've looked at your analytics for your games, but go to your games page and click on that link that says analytics at the top. See how many people have downloaded it. That's how many people have seen your work, your art. I bet that's more than people would have seen it if you just kind of kept it very close to the chest. But what about you can send your game to festivals. And shameless plug, we have one coming up at the Akron Art Museum, which you can, I've shared on the Discord. I will share again. But, we've had students, what am I even talking about? I'll share it in chat here and make it as easy as possible. So GameFest Akron is one that's even local for those of you who are my students, and you don't really have to travel somewhere. It's also like hybrid online, in person, so you're going to be able to choose if you want to display online, and then you never have to actually be in a physical space. It's great. But the idea is, what if you put your game into contention for a festival or a competition, and then we're accepted? Holy cow! Then you get to put one of those little laurel wreath graphics on your title card of your game. I was in this. That's pretty cool. That's amazing. Congratulations if you find yourself in that situation. And actually, we've had students from this class make it into this festival last 2 years. I'd love to see more. We also have students from future or later classes in our curriculum entering. So feel free to ask. Maybe you finish the game. And what do I mean by that? Some of you are like, well, it is finished. The assignment's over. Again, you're thinking of it wrong. It's not just homework. This is your creativity. And, so what if you package it up and make it something that you do charge for, or you make as a polished thing? You could sell it for money or not. It depends on if you and your team can agree on some agreeable terms. For divvying up the money and such. That's not what this class is going to be about. But that's something you could choose to do. And then post-mortem to learn about it from it before moving on. Maybe this was cool, but I don't really have a lot of plans for this. But take stock and say, well, I learned about and again, if you're saying, I learned this tool and that tool and in this engine and that engine, that's not what this is for. What you're saying is, I learned that level design is more complicated than I thought, and here's why. I learned that it's hard to program a user interface, and here's why. What did you learn about the making of a game? That's what I'm talking about. Again, if you just say, well, I learned GB Studio. No, you're doing it wrong. You want to say I learned this about the process, the release, the structure of my team. Next time I would structure my team better, and here's how. I wouldn't use Google Drive to share the project between team members or something. I would spend more time making a Trello board to manage the project. Stuff like that. That's what you want to talk about when you postmortem. Any questions about this? Let's go. I won't move on until 2 questions. Two questions. Won't move on till 2 questions. 2 questions. Come on. Is there a standard format for post-morteming, or is it just anything reflective you write after a project? You just kind of reflect. It's not even that you necessarily. I mean, you could write it down and then turn it into even like an article. That's a really good idea. And then or like a talk or something like that. Depending on like, your ability to publish some things, but in all likelihood, what I'm referring to is like you probably sit down with your team and just kind of say like, hey, how did this go? How did that go? What can we do better next time? Or even just personally. But it really all I'm saying is that like be reflective. Don't just be like, I got my homework done. Because again, that's the wrong approach. You want to think deeply about all of these milestones, all of these experiences. These are all experiences. When are we presenting our games? It's not the question. It's not the kind of question. You will present your games on the date that's in the syllabus. That is when you will present our games. So how would we go about starting to create a following for a project? An account starts with no followers, so how do you go about getting that first few? That's a really great question. So what I would do, and we talked about this in my class right before this with my what are we presenting? Yeah, just I merely want you to be reflective of the process. Again, don't just treat this as your schoolwork. That's my concern. Is that it's I want you to think deeply about what you're doing. So, and again, like that, the presentation dates are in the syllabus. So, how would you start by creating a following? So one of the best things you can do when you're starting your professional social media is go on a service that you think you're going to be able to devote some time to, or is compatible with the kind of thing you're showing off. Instagram and Twitter are really good for that. So what you generally want to do is, so let's say you're like making a game, and my advice is usually start following people who are like you, maybe other students or indie game developers, or just developers in general. But I emphasize indie simply because that is kind of like you're indie until you're AAA, so that kind of accounts to you, and you're going to get better response from that. Maybe follow some YouTubers and not just the Markipliers of the world, but like smaller ones as well. And what you ideally want to do is you want to like start joining the conversation. And I don't mean like at people a bunch, like, at people within reason. But, let's say like, hey, I've got a new game I'm working on. It's at itch.io, blah, 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 blah. Hashtag indie dev, And what you do is you are, hashtags are really useful because you're kind of like selecting your audience. So people who follow, hashtag indie dev would then maybe see it and then go look at it and then you'll be like, oh, cool game. That's kind of what you do. And then maybe you get like itch followers or something like that. Wow, that was really fun. You should keep working on it. What's it going to be? When's it going to be out or something like that? That's a good way to get people's eyes on it. It's just like, become part of that world. Like follow those people and then, tweet out with like what they're talking about. So like if you want to be a level designer, you might do like, here's my gray box that I did, today, hashtag level design, for my first person shooter or whatever. And then what you can do is you can also take advantage of things like, again, pay attention to what is happening in those community spaces, and make them work for you. So if you are making little games, and you want to show them off, you might think about always making sure you have some new screenshots or something fun to post for hashtag Screenshot Saturday, or even hashtag Screenshot Sunday, which there is, and it's usually people who got their stuff together late Saturday. But yeah, hashtag Screenshot Saturday is great. That gets a lot of nice visibility. And then you might have something like, equivalent, in if you are saying, like, again, a level designer or something, look to see if whatever job you're trying to do, animators or environment artist or whatever, also has like some other, yearly event or something like that. Is it a game jam? Is it art jam? Is it level designers have hashtag Blocktober, so in October people are like making tons of gray boxes and stuff. If you're an illustrator, Inktober, all the tobers, follow all those are great. But that's how, figure out what are applicable community things that you can kind of like share, and that'll help you get feedback, that'll help you build a following, and eventually have people eyes on your work. Hope that was helpful. Those were great questions. So next we're gonna talk about festivals. So festivals, what are festivals? They're limited time events for showcasing the work of small and independent game developers. Again, which is you. And I hear this one a lot from students, but that's not the arena I want to get in. Cool, great. You're indie till you're AAA, until you're hired. Okay. Let me be very blunt about that, because what the mistake people make, well, they make several mistakes. When I was teaching at George Mason, we had a friend of mine who was my student at the time. He was sitting he was like getting ready to graduate, and he was sitting in the front office of our program, and he just sat there and went, "You know what? I really screwed up, because and this is a person who like has his own like serious game studio now, and makes some indie stuff on the side, that allows him to make his indie stuff on the side. So he's doing well. He's found his space in the industry. But what he was feeling guilty about at the time was, he was like, man, I really screwed up, because I never thought of my classmates as like my collaborators and my community. And like, this isn't just him. A lot of students make this mistake, where they think, again, about just like the homework of it, and they never stop to think, these are people with the same talents and the same interests as me. What if we just like got together and made a project? So that was something that like, he didn't think of that indie mindset. He thought of, I'm here to be trained, and then I'm going to go and apply to jobs when I got out of school. And I'm not saying you don't do both. I'm saying you do both. But understand, like, use the mindset that you have to until you don't have to anymore. So, I'll hear students be like, well, that's a cute little indie game, but, my standards are higher. The hell do you mean your standards are higher? No, your standards are not higher. You need to establish yourself. So use any and all means you can. The people that I had another conversation with somebody at GDC where, somebody asked me, he's like an artist, and he goes, hey, is this good? And how about like, what's your advice about getting a job with this type of thing? And I said like, oh, this is what I did, but take what I say with a grain of salt, because like, I've never worked AAA or something, and I can see that that's what you're aiming towards. And he says to me, yeah, but you have a job. Think about that. What happens to people is that they focus, they think that their standard, their aim, they need to be wholly devoted to that only. and they don't think about just kind of taking what comes in. And when they do that, then 5 years goes by and they've never worked in the industry. And you know, I contrast this with like one of my best friends in the game industry. He worked, IT, and then became a production manager in a security company, and did that for like 10 years in like South Dakota. And then got a job at Epic. So he's making the engine. Well, I should ask him which actual division he's in. I don't know. But, he's making like the tools the games you play and the tools you use and all this other stuff. So, take what you can get and then use that as the rung on the ladder. And understand your career goals are going to change. Like, I started my career wanting to get into AAA, and I took what was available at the time to try to like build up my portfolio, right? And then when I started getting job offers from AAA or invitations to apply from AAA or AAA friends of mine coming and saying, "Hey, how happy are you at this job you're at?" And I'd be like, "Very," and they'd be like, "Oh, because I was going to try to recruit you for studio I work at or something." Like, when that happened, it was like, well, now I've got 3 kids, and I, am very happy living near my parents where, like, my kids can grow up with their grandparents. And, your priorities change. And, but you can still, like, actively do things in the industry. This is why when you all take my Games for Education course, I always try to emphasize, I'm like, look, I know this is not in your head right now, 20, 21, 22-year-old, what you think you want to do. But trust me when I tell you it's a job sometimes. And sometimes that job is like, oh, I have everything I need, And people that I know that did go and get the dream job sometimes are like, I also remember one time sitting near 2 friends of mine at GDC, and like in the CA program, don't worry, I'm going to get on the lecture. I just, I want to give you some perspective. 2 friends of mine that didn't know each other were like, I was sitting near them both. And so as a conference associate, which are the people that volunteer to like put in some time to like help the festival, the conference run, there's a raffle on Friday night. And usually it's like some of the raffle items are just like stuff that developers bring by that's like extra swag from their booth that they don't want to like carry home. But some of them are like, hey, wow, I was a CA, or I believe in the CA program, or you guys are awesome, or this CA was super helpful at our talk, so here's like a copy of our game signed by our entire team or something like that. A statue of Link, and you're just like, oh, thanks. And there's like, wait, how am I going to get this through TSA at 5 a.m. tomorrow? I'll figure it out, kind of thing. And, so my one buddy, Jimmy, he wins a copy of Heart of the Swarm signed by the entire team, and he's just ecstatic. And my buddy John, who's in front of us, is like, oh, hey, I worked on that. And Jimmy like reverently hands him his pen and is like, could you please sign this, sir? And John's just like, I guess. And like, this is a person who I knew when he was like applying to Blizzard and is like, I need to put everything off to get this job, and it is super duper important. And when he gets the job, I saw like somebody talk with him, and it was during this conversation where he's like, what's it like to work there? And John goes, it's work, so I know it doesn't, you might not believe it, but like, yeah, when you're in it, you're like, oh, it's work. So that's why I'm always saying, like, don't, like, be open to what's around you. Be open to the don't label yourself, because then you're gonna you don't really understand what it's actually like for the people that are in these positions. That job you think is going to be amazing it'll be a job. It might just end up feeling like a job, or that little studio that you do some work for might give you the means and the assets and the time and the opportunity to then go to the next studio that's bigger and more like what you want to do and say, I launched these games, so never say like, that's not for me, because it's for you until the next thing comes along. Anyway, so yeah, pay attention to indie festivals, and consider yourself indie until you are hired. Whether that be contract or with permanently with benefits. A lot of these offer student tracks for the purpose of helping new devs get exposure. Your students, you have student games. You have 3 student games, in fact, now. Probably more, based on like what other classes you have to take as part of our program. I was asked to quantify it for a ranking survey, and they were like, do you have them at least make one operable game and put it on a market? And I'm like, holy cow, we make them do 6. So like, you're more experienced, even though you might not think it, than a lot of students whose program is like, we make you make a game. No, we make you make 6 games. So enter them and stuff. For the love of God, enter them. Sometimes they require for entry money, but not always. Look at the terms of the event. A lot of them are free. Sam Arcade is free. Akron Art Museum is free. Boston Fig is cheap. Mivs is free. Indiecade and IGF are not free. BitBash, I should ask them. I'm on like the board of a museum with some of the people from BitBash. Other things you need: screenshots of your game, trailers, gameplay video, written description, and a game demo. Like what's on your itch page. Funny how I did that, huh? Your itch page is your press kit, which is the stuff that you would then probably copy and paste into the entry fields for a game a game conference or a festival. So that's why we do the things we do in courses like this, and why you should continue doing that even if it's not in the assignment, because it's to your benefit and it opens up other doors and other avenues. But hold on. Old 90s Simpsons reference. Here's the thing about festivals. Don't just submit your game to everything. Do not. Why? Well, because your game is not suited to everything, and everything is not suited to your game. I know this is going to seem weird, and the same applies to jobs. You could be like, I'm a huge fan of League, and then you read the news stories about Riot and some of their practices. And like, I know some Riot people, and they seem happy and fine, and they seem like they're doing well, but there is this like moral area where or other companies, there is this area where they're kind of like, well, I've got to come to grips with this part of my job and this part of my studio and that part of my studio, to have a job here. So it's worth sitting down and thinking like, yeah, I may enjoy their games, but do I want to do that? And again, this is something that I told myself when it was like I started getting offers and invitations to apply to things, and it was like, I like seeing my family at night. I like sleeping. Those are good things to do. So it's just not for me anymore. I'm not saying it's bad or wrong. I'm just saying like it was not for me anymore at the place in life where I was. So it's a thing you kind of think about. So the same goes for festivals. Is your game is it going to be worth you putting your little prototype of your game into the IGF year 1 when it's like kind of barely working? No. because it's not at the level of polish that an IGF game is at. So that's the kind of thing you want to think about. Like, is my level of polish the right level of polish? Does the festival take the kind of game that I've made? And some of this is as cut as dry as, like, you can't enter a tabletop game in Games for Change because they don't accept them. It's not that hard to accept them, but, they don't. So, think about that when you are picking your festivals to apply to. Is like, do they even allow my type of game that I've made? So if you make a tabletop game, put it into tabletop game conventions or conferences. If you've made a mobile game, make one that's amenable to mobile games. If you've made a triple indie, super duper commercial, like very polished game, put it in the IGF. That's kind of what you want to think about. Another thing to think about is, like, do you want feedback for your game? So I mentioned, like, your first prototype. So if you enter your game in, when I was in Baltimore, or when I was in, well, I wasn't in Baltimore, but when I was in the DC area, and we'd drive up to Baltimore for Gamescape, for Artscape, and then had this thing called Gamescape. We would put in, like, our earliest prototype of our game to go get people to look at it. And that was because that was, like, the kind of game that would be entered in Gamescape if you looked at the demos. So that was helpful because that helped us, like, get early eyes on it and bug test our game. Other things you want to do later on when it's more close to release, like MIVs. MIVs is a little more polished. Things like that. So think about, like, what type of game do they take early demos, or do they expect something like, this is releasing this year and we want to give this award or something. And then what kind of crowd do they attract? I've had games where, so Gamescape as an example again, I've shown games there that were kind of chewy gamer type games with, like, lots of choices and things to do, and you got to manage a lot of elements and resources and things like that. And it was always scary going there because the audience there didn't always get it. We always thought, like, oh man, we're way farther from release than we think. Like, it's not clicking. So we need to fix this and we need to fix that. And that made good changes to our game, but, like, there was always this kind of, like, something's not clicking. What's going on? Well, here's the deal. Gamescape is a great event. Love it. Artscape is a great event. I love it. It's always somehow on the hottest day of July in downtown Baltimore, in the Mid-Atlantic region, where it gets very humid, very sweaty. And the people that go into Gamescape, which was when I was doing it, in the lobby of University of Baltimore's, like where they had their game program. It was, like, in the lobby of the school, which was air conditioned. We were the air conditioned space. So it was everybody off the street looking for air conditioning, and all the parents who were like, I just don't want to pay attention to my kids for, like, 30 seconds. Can you just let them play your game? So, man, my game is a shooting game. Just let them play. It's like, what? So what happened is, hyper casual audience. When we took that same game to MIVs at MagFest, which, if you don't know what MagFest is, it's the Music and Gaming Festival. It's a festival for gamers and anime fans, and it has concerts by bands who do cover music for games. We'd take our game there, it clicked. It's like, oh, the thing that was wrong was the venue. Everybody got it. And, the ease of use of things that we made for the casual audience were certainly helping with the gamer audience. Don't get me wrong. But, like, it's like, oh, who's your market? It's basic marketing. So, understand your market. So these are important things to think about when you apply to festivals. Now, again, I'm not talking smack about Artscape. I put it on the slide. But, think about alternative places to show. Cast your net wider. The IGF and Indicate are not the only places. Sometimes you do have local arts events that run a game thing. Sometimes you have museums that run a game thing. I would know because I approach museums and was like, yo, you should have one of these. And they're usually like, yeah, that sounds good. But maybe there's anime conventions. Otakon, and I always have to stop myself from saying Otakon, like, Metal Gear Solid. Esports events. VR events. They're all similar audiences, so sometimes they will also invite game developers. But these are places that if you want to get people in front of your game, it's good to do so. Ask me a question about this. Um, So even conventions like OhioCon or ColossalCon would be viable places. Yes, in fact, I know some people that have worked at those cons and are even doing game events there. So yes, yes, you can do that. I think they do have indie game pieces, if I'm not mistaken. If they don't, I'm wrong. But yeah, those are great. And again, like you get a lot of crossover between the anime world and the gaming world. So these are all viable places. Thank you. That was a great question. So let's talk about beyond just like the top end thing. Like let's talk about running a booth. Booth. What's a booth? A booth is a table or space prominently featuring your game's branding and demo stations of your studio or project. Now, we are in a time where people are not running booths in person. However, we are in a time where people are coming up with creative solutions to having booths. And what that means is it's even like very compatible with what you have in with your itch pages. Sometimes you'll have events like what we did for Akron Art Museum last year, where we have a online gallery that links to people's itch pages or their the Steam pages or whatever. Sometimes people will set up a virtual environment in like VR chat, like the Indie Maker Syndicate, which is like a spin-off of MagFest Indies from this past year for complicated reasons. They did a thing in VR chat, and we had to like 3D model ourselves a little booth, and then they just like put our booth in this space, and it was a placeholder, but it was like a way to look at this cool game, and here's the list of games. Or they even did like a little Quake VR thing too, because it was like Doom and Quake themed was the theme this year for the event. they theme it after a game every year, like a retro game. And so they even had like another thing where you could like link to your they'd link you to your game's page or whatever. So it was really great. So like still same thing, just like digital too. So this still applies. So a booth is a table or digital space or visual representation of your game for people to learn about it. Booths help visibility. You get a booth at a convention, somebody attends the convention, they visit your booth, they know about your game. Easy as that. And then, thousands of people might see your game and then know about your game. Holy cow. Isn't that awesome? You want that. Booths help sales. If your game is done, you can go get a booth and then be like, hey, buy my game. Now some conventions, like because the place that they're in will say like you can sell, you can't sell, just make sure you work that out with them so that you're not violating any rules or something. Booths help you get feedback. So maybe you're not ready to sell yet, but maybe you are wanting to get it in front of audiences. I had a guy actually at this event where I took this picture walk up to my booth and say, hi, I'm a QA tester for Bethesda, and I'm walking around giving all the indies a free test. And we're like, sir, please have at it. And he gave us great feedback, and we implemented it right away. Because, it was like a professional QA guy. Quality assurance, for those of you who don't know what that means. So booths are super important for tuning your game and understanding. This is where you also do the, never start with level 1, always start with level 3 or 4. Because then you'll need to know, I've had to tell this person to use this button. I've had to tell people to do this X number of times, so that needs to be in our tutorial. But I was surprised to learn that I didn't have to explain this other feature, so that's not as high priority. That's why, because you want to start with level 3 or 4 and not level 1. You want to know what to put in level 1 for your tutorial. Running a booth. What do you want at a booth? You want 2 or 3 demo stations based on your ability to cover them and your what you are able to provide. So, usually what I've done is I bring my computer, you bring your computer. There you go. Demo stations. So you have team members each bring a PC. And if you're working alone, sometimes it's one, and that happens. So be it. Avoid bringing multiple games unless you have more than one person to cover your games at the booth. Do not try to have 2 games running at the same time and only one person manning the booth, because you are going to have you're going to be in deep explaining one game to somebody, and somebody will sit down with the other game. You're going to be thrown off your rhythm of explaining a game. One of the benefits, what happens early in a convention is you kind of stumble through the first few demos before you get here's what my pitch is. Your pitch, but knowing your pitch and giving your pitch is 2 very different things. You want to, you'll eventually get into a rhythm. This will completely torpedo that. So, because you're not ever in a rhythm, you're like, oh man, I got to do a bunch of this one, and then I have to do a bunch of that one, and then I got to alternate back and forth. You can never get your pitch quite down. What you want in an ideal scenario, here's what you have. And again, if you're a student starting out, if you're just starting out, you're not necessarily going to do this. It's okay. But here's something to build up to. What you want is you want a screen, if your game has a screen, facing out, preferably, if you can, not a laptop. And here's why. It's really just a polish thing. There's nothing wrong with having a laptop, and that's your PC. There's a guy in this picture doing the same thing. That's fine. Do what you can afford. But what looks really nice is, and again, if you get into this as a profession, get a second monitor, have the monitor facing outward, get a USB keyboard, mouse, controller, whatever, get a setup. That's what's facing, the second keyboard, the second mouse, the second monitor, or a controller. That's what's facing the audience. What's facing you is your laptop or another screen. If you are using a desktop, that's cool too. But like, make sure that you get a screen too. Here's why. You don't have to hover over the player's shoulder to watch them test your game. You can watch from you can watch from behind your table, and that allows you to get playtesting notes without interrupting the player. That's really important. You don't want to interrupt players while they're testing your game. And if you notice a little collision error, maybe you use WASD to kind of like get him back right on track, goose him along a little bit. That happens too. But that's ideally what you do. You want to have like you get to watch what they're doing so that you can take your notes and not be like invasive. It's really important. But it is a nice setup, and it looks super clean from the consumer standpoint to just have the controller that you're going to be playing, not necessarily the laptop. If your game is multiplayer, pro tip, get a big TV. Or a projector with a screen on it. Like get one of those little mini projectors and then get like a cheap screen and have it behind you. And what you want to do is, because you want to attract a crowd. You want the crowd to come and watch people play your multiplayer game. And that'll get like some hype going. Now, I gotta schlep a TV all the way to this place. Here's the super duper Galaxy Brain tip. You see a lot. I've never personally done this, but you see it a lot with game developers at shows. Fly into a place. They go to Best Buy. They buy a TV. They keep all the packaging and they keep all the stickers on it. And all the, like the screen cover and all the other stuff. They make it like it was never actually opened. And then they do the event, and then they return it. They put it back in its package, they return it. That's what a lot of developers do. And next time you are at one of these events, I hope we can be at some of these events again. And if you are going around indie places, if you do see ones with TVs, see how many of those yellow stickers that they have on the upper corner. Like the power sticker or whatever it is, like the environmental sticker. See how many of those have them, because that actually is that is what the developer did. You see those a lot at events. And then, the other thing too is have your trailer ready to go. Because what happens is, if